Hello! In this screencast I would like to show a few methods how you can remove outliers from your data using curios.IT. Let's select here one of the available demo datasets. I choose the countries dataset. And let's look at this data in the scatter plot viewer. We see that the variables, or at least those we see at the moment, are highly correlated. And the easiest way to remove outliers is to use the typical function. There's a button on the left side. You select how many records you want to keep. So let's, for instance, say 80%. And we see what it does. In this case, it removes from the ends of this correlated distribution. And that's maybe not what you really want to do. Let's look at another case. We select the 5 clusters dataset. Again, we look at it in the scatter plot viewer, and we see we have 5 clusters. 4 of them are rather close together, and the 5th one is a little bit separated from the other 4s. If we apply the typical button, we will see that this 5th cluster gets removed almost entirely. This is because this method works using averages. The further away the individual records are from this average, the more likely it is that they get removed. And of course, because these 4 clusters are close together, the average is somewhere close to these 4 clusters, and these 5th clusters, the records of these 5th clusters, they're far away. So these records get removed. Again, this is not what you might want to do. Now there are other methods. For instance, we can choose the density viewer. Here you can directly select which dense region of the data distribution you want to keep. And for instance, now it's 52% is visible, indicated here, and you can select the visible button, and then you have removed outliers if you want. You can also do this in the cubes view of this viewer by setting the minimum records per cube to a value higher than 1. For instance, in this case there are not so many records, so only 2. You see some of the small cubes disappear, and again you can click on visible to remove them. And you have some outliers removed. This method is rather coarse. It also considers only the variables you have selected above, so not all the variables like the typical method. What you also can do, you can use, let's go back to the original dataset. So again, our 5 clusters, you can use a density-based clustering method like dbScan. Now the clustering algorithm correctly finds the 5 clusters. I can set here epsilon to 0.1, a little bit different value, and we see that we get now some noise points. This is probably more what you expect in this case, and you can switch to a different viewer. Let's choose this one. Again, choose dbScan 0.1, and then you can select the noise bar and select here not selected. And then these records get removed, and you see we are from 200, we're down to 183 records. And if we look now at the scatter plot, then still all 5 clusters are present. We can do the same data or the same thing with the countries dataset. Let's look again at it at the scatter plot viewer, and I again choose here dbScan, and this is already quite a reasonable. There's too much noise, or 0.2 is a reasonable value for epsilon, and we again get here some noise, and we can remove it with the same method, dbScan, and we select here the noise and go to not selected, and then we have these outliers removed. Another method might be, I go back to the original dataset, removing whole clusters of outliers. For instance, here we see in this dimension reduced on this plane configuration of clusters, we see we have here a lot of clusters quite close together, and there is one cluster further away of 5 data records, and we could say these are outliers. We can remove them again by selecting and then pressing the not selected button. This you can do repeatedly if you want. If you want to see more clusters, you can increase here the number of clusters. Let's go back to the original data set. For instance, 16 clusters, and then you might have a more fine-grained resolution. You can also use the self-organizing maps view matrix viewer. There again, you see clusters, and those outliers are typically on hills, and you can remove them with the not selected button. And you can do this repeatedly. For instance, here again, we might say that these are outliers. We can remove them too.